our guest of honor. Oop, there we go. Introducing tonight is Dr. Sara Metz. Welcome everybody to The Power of Our Story, and your host, Sarah Carell, and I'll be helping facilitate. My name is David Berez. So Dr. Sara Metz has been an invited speaker at conferences and events across the country for organizations looking for an engaging and experienced speaker on topics such as stress injury recovery and resiliency deployment. Dr. Metz is a public safety psychologist with 10 plus years experience working with emergency responders. She is passionate about supporting agencies and critical incident response, wellness program development, stress and resiliency training, and peer support supervision. Additionally, Dr. Metz serves as a mental health consultant for corporations, government agencies, and schools and universities. Thank you, Dr. Metz, for being here, Sarah. And we are certainly looking forward to your story, your experiences, and everything you can share with us. Personally, I'm excited about the resiliency piece of what you have to say, since that is my love at this time. So,
that's your jam.
It is. It is. Take it away.
Well, thank you guys for having me. I always joke that please call me Sarah. I don't behave well enough to be called doctor. Yes, I have a certificate somewhere buried in a drawer, but I'm fine being called Sarah for the night. I've been a public safety psychologist for 12 years. And I started my career in the jail. I was going to be a clinician in the jails. And then I'm fairly arrogant. And so I decided I wanted to really push it. And I decided I wanted to work in Max. And so they stuck little 20-year-old me in Max facility at the Denver County Jail, just to see what would happen. And as many of you probably see the ending of that story, every single male in Max was masturbating as I walked by. And I thought, I don't think this is for me. I'm not feeling this as an entire career. So I decided I liked the deputies more than the inmates, and decided to stick with helping the good guys. So I've been a public safety psychologist for 12 years. For the past 4.5 now, Nick and I have owned Code 4 Counseling. That's the business we started together because we really were very passionate about taking care of our responders. And we really want to do that in a unique way. A lot of you talked about, I think it was Christopher, you talked about wanting to live very authentically. And I just lit up when you said that, because that's really so much of what we're looking for. Is we have found that in telling of stories and sharing of experiences and creating that tribe, which clearly is what you guys have all done here, that tribe is what really helps people. And that's a big part of what we do now. And so I think a couple of you talked about, somebody on here was saying that they're training to be a peer supporter. Was that Todd? Yeah, that was Todd. So we love doing peer support. And one of the things that we do in every peer support class that we have is a lot of peer support groups do role plays as part of the training. We actually don't do role plays. We make people tell their own stories, which is very anxiety provoking to everybody. But it's so much more authentic, and it really helps people to understand, what is it like to be vulnerable? What is it like to share your own story, not feel totally sure what the response is going to be? And every single class we've had has been amazing, and people have shared the most extraordinary stories. So we do a lot of training, a lot of counseling for responders of all sorts. And I also, Nick and I saw kind of a gap. I think actually, David, you were talking about this just as I came onto the call, talking about the education piece. I think you were mentioning that there's kind of a gap, and I'd love to hear more about your thoughts on that tonight. But we have seen a gap in terms of the counseling services that are available to you guys, and really ensuring that there are what we consider culturally competent clinicians who you guys can go to, and they understand dispatch work, they understand law enforcement, they understand the fire service, they understand the military, they understand that unique culture. And Nick and I both thought there's not education, there's not programs out there that are specializing in serving you guys. So we decided to create one. I decided that'd be a fun little side hobby, is create a program, which was dumb but awesome at the same time. So there is now a full counseling program through the university. So the University of Colorado Global Campus, CSU Global, we now have an online counseling program, and it is entirely for those who want to specialize in serving emergency responders and the military. Thank you, Janet. I love the 2 thumbs up. We're really proud of it. It is a program that does allow people to get licensed as clinicians, but every single course specializes in how does this apply to these populations. We have a whole course on suicide prevention, and it's suicide prevention for responders and military. We have a course on substance use, and it's talking about how this relates to responders and military. We have a trauma course. We have, again, just basic counseling courses. So we're really proud of it. We have about 80. It just opened. It went live. When did it go live, Nick? September 2020, I think. So just last year, September. And we have about 80 students in the program now, which is amazing. I love the idea that 80 clinicians are going to go out there in the world and serve their communities and be better prepared to help responders and military personnel. So we keep growing every month, and new students are joining every month, and so we're pretty darn proud of that. So run the business, I run that program, and then Nick and I thought, oh, we haven't taken on a big giant project in a while. Let's start another project. So we started a nonprofit. So we just started the It's a Calling Foundation, which is also going to serve responders and military personnel. And we're trying to start this nonprofit so that we can get to people who don't necessarily have the funds for it. So it's specifically for retired folks and people from small agencies who can't fund the services themselves. So that's just getting off the ground. But as you can tell, we kind of live and breathe this. We love our responders, and we love our military personnel, and want to make sure that they're getting taken care of the way they should be. So you guys tell me, David, you had a question, I think, about the resiliency piece itself. What can I answer for you?
Thank you for that introduction. That was awesome. Sorry, it took me a second there to find my mouse that I accidentally knocked away here. So, I find all that incredibly interesting. First of all, the process of how you got from point A to point Z at this point, or probably not, because I think there's a lot more to come from you guys, but which is awesome. I love the resiliency thing. It's part of my journey, and becoming an instructor through the resiliency program is also part of that. So the program that I teach with is based off of Dr. Seligman's book Flourish, and it's using a lot of those lessons to build out this three-day class that we teach. Mm-hmm. Through that process and reading his book, I'm like on the third time I should say, reading the book, or actually listening to it, because I don't read, I do audiobooks. Street cops, we don't read.
Nope, I get it.
But so I've actually just started filling out the application. You guys are actually the first people I'm telling this to, for the MAP program at UPenn. And nice. So I'm hoping that works out, but I'd love to hear the difference between what you know about that program. I can expand on it if necessary, versus what you guys are doing, and sell me on switching, and help me understand like what's the benefits of one versus the other.
Yeah, I'll have you go into a little bit more detail about that particular program, but I think anytime folks are looking for a counseling program and they're wanting to make sure that it's really geared towards serving military responders or trauma-based programs, there's a lot of trauma-based programs out there as well. You want to make sure that it actually sets you up for licensure. And that's something that kind of always bothered me. There's actually quite a few programs out there that give you a master's degree, and it's kind of, it's advertising, they're advertising themselves as counseling programs, but they don't let you get licensed, or they don't walk you through that path. So I think that that's a really key piece. I think the UPenn program does set you up for licensure.
Not the MAP program. I don't think so. It's a master's for applied positive psychology, which is essentially his work
His,
in
yeah,
a
cognitive
master's degree.
psychology is, yeah.
But it's more of just a straight up academic experience
Mhm.
to teach it versus counseling it.
Yeah.
Um,
So
but I,
that's kind of a personal decision on your end of what specifically you would want to do with the master's. If what you're wanting to do is mostly focus on teaching, then that's going to be a great program for you. If you're wanting to do like individual counseling, group counseling, those sorts of things, you may want to consider a counseling program that sets you up for licensure. One of the differences with what we call the MERP program, the Military and Emergency Responder Psychology program, is you do a practicum and you do an internship. So by the time you graduate, you have 700 hours of experience working with clients and getting that experience of training, wellness checks, counseling, group counseling, all of that. So it's a pretty intense program, but it also gives you a lot of that experiential piece of it. Nick's actually in the program. We've got a lot of responders in Colorado who are in it. No, I am not teaching him. No, he does not get easy A's. I give him a hard time and he earns every grade he gets. I built him the damn program. After that, he's on his own. But yeah, that's the difference, is there's a lot of programs that are more kind of that academic side. And then there's some that kind of give you that experimental side. I see questions showing up here. Let's see. Carrie, did you have a question?
I do. I actually have my master's, and Massachusetts changed the laws. The last year while I was finishing up my master's, it's in counseling psychology. So the last year before I was finishing up my master's, they changed the law and made it from a 30 credit master's
To
to
60 or something like that. Yeah.
and then the 700 hours.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I was on the force at the time. This happened. I graduated with my master's in 2017. I have since called my advisor back to see if I could go and finish in order to get my licensure. And under mass law, I would actually have to go back and get another master's, where I'm like, I might as well just get my PhD.
Yeah.
So that being said, in your program, would somebody like me be able to actually start and continue to get my licensure where it's in a different state?
You're going to hate the answer to this.
I know.
And unfortunately, I'm sorry, I hate to give you an answer you don't like. That's actually a standard across the country. Unfortunately, if you've already graduated with a master's, no program can accept those credits and then let you continue from that point forward. You have to have, if you hadn't graduated yet, you could use those credits, which to me is mind-bogglingly stupid. I don't know why it is that way, but you have to have not yet graduated to use the credits. Once you graduate, they say those credits are for that degree only. And if you were to go back for another master's, or you wanted to be licensed, you'd have to start over. So to your point, I would actually say you probably are better suited to look at a doctorate program. And that might just be a better fit because you already have a master's.
And that was actually why I went for the coaching.
Yeah.
And why I'm working towards my national boards, because that is regulated.
Yep.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. Yep. Questions everywhere. David, I guess I should let you do this. I'm very bossy. Ask Nick. I just jump in, but I'll hand it back to you.
no worries. I'll go in order of how it is on my screen. Chris has his hand up, but I think it may have been for somebody else. I'm not 100% sure.
No, that one's for me. Question for you on organizational peer support.
Yes.
The unique perspective that you have in what you do, and being married to Nick and the different organizational things he's done and the good things that he's done both in Seattle and in Colorado. How do you feel that you get the best buy-in for your buck, if you will? It's tough to get people to, everything that we do right now is very reactive, right?
Yep.
From my perspective, it seems to be why I said I live authentically and through my process is so that people can see that bad news doesn't necessarily have to define exactly who you are and rule your day, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think that it happens on a peer level first, more than a leadership spot, because I think that there's, in law enforcement and in a lot of places, there's a lot of mistrust between administration and management and the rank and file. From your perspective, how do you think that you best suit that going forward for peer binding? Because I think that a lot of departments are trying to do the right thing, but I think from a ground level, it seems more of a check the box thing than it actually seems impact.
I totally agree with you. It's a great question. I would say I have seen really, really drastically different setups in terms of peer support teams and organizations. I think peer support teams, to your point, can be a checkbox. They don't work if they're a checkbox. If it's a reactive peer support team, it isn't going to go anywhere. If it's a, hey, let us know if you need anything. We have peer support if you need anything, and it's on the person to reach out to peer support, it's not going to work. The peer support teams that we have seen and helped build here that I think work the best are the ones that are really proactive. They reach out, they say, hey, we heard you had a tough call. Do you want to set up a debrief for that? Do you want to just come in and talk? They're really involved in reintegrating officers after they've been involved in a critical incident. They host family nights, date nights, family academies. So they host events. And so that gets the buy-in. I will say we also saw, we worked with Oklahoma City PD to do a full wellness assessment. And they redid everything at Oklahoma City PD because we figured out you got to kind of start over from scratch. And that included their peer support team. And this sounds kind of shitty, but we said, you got to scrap your peer support team. Nobody trusts them. Which what we ended up doing is saying, put out a survey, ask people in your agency, who would you talk to? Who is the person you would naturally go to if you needed something? And we had them start from there. Organically let the agency figure out who should be on your peer support team. Doesn't mean they have to be on the team, but it gives you a really great set of names to say, hey, people trust you. Like you're already an informal leader. Let's give you a role. That's been really helpful.
Okay, second part to the question, if I may.
Yeah.
So that's the part. And again, peer support stuff is very reactive, right? By its nature. You're supporting people after the fact.
Yeah.
With education and the studies that you've done, how do you feel that you can, we train to shoot, we train to fight, we train the laws and to write reports, but we've never really trained to process the trauma that you're going to deal with and the adversities that you're going to deal with. How do you feel that you can incorporate somehow in your training? Because I think through our training, it's a natural process, mock scenes, just as an example. You go from one call to call to call, which is exactly what you do, call to call to call.
Right.
How do you think that you can prep new folks and or people slowly integratedly, but probably starting with the academy level or possibly people coming out of the academy to start to deal with that trauma? Do you pose or propose that you would debrief after each, if you do an active shooter training, that you have some sort of debrief in that? Do you think that helps the mind rep that to help lessen that emotional impact?
Yeah, I will say I actually just did a debrief last night with an agency here locally. It was a very young team. It was a fatal traffic accident. Again, you're Seattle PD. How often do you guys have fatal traffic accidents? This isn't, in terms of a trauma for law enforcement, not a huge issue, but it was such a young team. The longest any of them had been in law enforcement was 5 years. They were young. And so they said, this is a great opportunity to do a debrief. No one in that room had ever debriefed a call before. And so we taught them what it's like to just check in with yourself after a tough call. We're not assuming that you're completely traumatized and you can't recover, but we're teaching the language of what was the hardest part. How do you track how you're doing from night one to you didn't sleep that night? Now it's 3 days later. How are you doing now? Are you starting to heal? Is it staying the same or is it getting worse? And so teaching them how to check in with themselves and how to check in with each other. And so teaching debriefs, I think, is huge. Even if it doesn't feel like, oh, this is this life-altering call. Well, you never know. And so we got to start somewhere, to your point, is teach them how to do it. So I think that that's been really important. The other thing that we see is we're really teaching folks to tell their stories proactively. One of my favorite stories is one of our agencies, which is super old school, sheriff's office in the state. Very much we don't talk about this, suck it up, buttercup, I'm fine, we don't talk. They had a command level person who came in completely at the end of his rope. He was suicidal. He was 35 years in and said, I have completely effed up my life. I am an alcoholic. I have been drinking since I was 12 and I have no idea what to do now. And he needed to go to treatment and he was terrified. He didn't want anyone to know. He actually had to medically detox because it was really scary. They were like, you cannot just stop drinking. He did a 30-day program and he basically just told everyone, I have to have a surgery. I'm going to be out. He took FMLA and he went out. He walked out that door and he said, I want to tell my story and I want to tell everybody. And he went to the PIO. We helped him set it up. He went to the PIO with his agency. He said, I want you to film my story. He filmed his story and it was shown at every in-service for a year. He showed up at every in-service to be there and to talk to people about his story. And it was the coolest thing. He was very well respected. And again, what was cool about it is he opened himself up. And what people got to see from him was there was no discipline. He didn't lose his gun and badge, and he has since promoted. And so what a great example of a guy where it's like, yeah, I just outed myself. I was not okay. I had to be hospitalized. I had to go to treatment. And he's promoted in an agency that anyone would say, if you say you're struggling, you're going to get fired. He's like, I don't want people to think that. And he now will drive anyone to treatment who needs it. He's, again, still command level. And he's like, you need to go to treatment. I'll be the one who drives you there. And I will be the one who picks you up. And people take him up on it. It's been this really cool shift. But it took us years to help them shift that culture. But it's this push of just, we're not going to believe in the stigma. We're not going to let that stigma stop forward progress. And they're doing it.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Super special. But you said something interesting, that he was a command level officer within that agency. And I think that's where those conversations have to come from. I think they have to come from the top down, because there's too much fear from the bottom up. And you got to lead by example. And it's very difficult to do from the bottom up. You can be a peer leader by example from the bottom, but you can't be an agency lead from the bottom. It's difficult to get that buy-in from.
I totally agree with you. But what I would also say is leaders, again, and I love to give Nick crap, but I also love to give him kudos when he's earned it. And Nick is one of the few leaders that I've seen in my career who speaks the language of wellness, who speaks the language of resiliency very naturally. Most leaders don't. They didn't grow up with this. So I do think, as much as I hear that it's important, well, it has to come from the top down, yes and no. I think they learn the language when it starts getting talked throughout the ranks. And they start to think, I don't know that language. What is everyone talking about? And then they lean into it and say, shit, am I the only one who doesn't speak this language? I guess I should learn it. And I think sometimes we want the leaders to be the most proactive and say, no, they have to start, but they don't speak it. We're teaching it to the younger, we're teaching in academies now, we're teaching it to the younger folks. And in all honesty, I would say, I think those are going to be the ones who speak it fluently, and the leaders start taking notice, and the best leaders will say, I want to learn that language too.
And I think the struggle is finding the good leaders to filter that through. I know in my experience, I'm not going to put any names or places to it, but some of the leaders that I've worked under, one in specific, he was the guy that got shoved in the locker in high school for 4 years and became a cop to get back at the world. And then he became a leader within the law enforcement to get back at the cops that represented the guys that shoved him in the locker. And when you have somebody like that leading the agency, it's very difficult to break them of their own history to be true leaders. And because to be a true leader is to build other people up to be the new leaders. And when you're constantly thumbing people down to hold them down, those people are not going to recognize the needs of their people as you're talking about here. So it's yeah, it all starts with leadership, but you're right. The language does start from the bottom, and I love that concept.
Yeah.
Janet.
Okay, now I've even got more that I want to say. So first off, I think that you should connect with Michael Geyer and that officer that did that video to all the training, that his story needs to go viral and that more leaders need to know about it. Actually, one of my bosses put me over the edge so much. That's how she put me off work. And blessings in disguise, right? Car accident, a whole bunch of stuff happening. And then I needed some more time, and she just, anyways, put me over the edge enough so that I could get diagnosed. I thought I was having problems with the car accident, when in actual fact, it turned out that I had a cumulative PTSD from my job. And sought help. And this is 2002. This is when the accident, 2003 was when I was diagnosed. And this is long before they ever would even, never mind, think a police officer could get PTSD, never mind a police dispatcher. And so I never did anything through the force. It was all private. That, and the first psychologist I had, I couldn't even go back to her. Like, it was awful. I wouldn't pay anybody to go to her. The second one was amazing. But I don't want to work with the trauma. The peer support, I want to tell you that in over 30 years of dispatching and having officers killed and officers committing suicide and working with some of those officers, I never once, until after a shooting when I was retired and working as a relief dispatcher, that I ever did a debrief.
Wow. Yeah, and now, but that drives me nuts. The dispatchers are, and again, we still see it, they're forgotten. Now, when I do debriefs, I always tell them, did you invite the dispatchers who took the call? And everybody who was involved in this, in the incident, including dispatch, needs to be offered the opportunity to attend. And now it's just common knowledge here because we fought so hard for it. But I'm sure your experiences, again, you guys were forgotten for many, many years.
Yeah, and so it kind of, and same when you talk about the peer support. Believe me, the people they had on the peer support, I wouldn't go to any of them. None of them. There wasn't one that I would have gone to for peer support. And I took a peer support course, but it was done through the health services, not through the force, but through our public health services. Basically meant for people with depression or clinical or something, nothing to do with first responders. And I'm sure everybody agrees with me here, like my psychologist and even other people. We're great at lying to us.
Yeah, you are.
We are so good at that there's no way that we're telling them the truth. I tell you, the psychologist I had, she took one look at me and she says, I know what's wrong. She was amazing. But after I worked with her, what I found is she says, I don't need to work with you anymore, because she gave me some great tools. There was nothing after that to help me. Nothing. There, and that's what I want to be an advocate for. And that's why I tell you, take something, it's like you pour half of the glass of water out, there's a void. You want to fill it up, right? And so same with, once we've gone through treatment to get us, we're not that same person. Who are we now? We don't know who we are now because we've lived with this for so long. I didn't know that I didn't laugh anymore. I didn't even realize that. Not to the really great joyful laugh, like you laugh at things, but so there's nothing after. There was nothing. I started taking personal development courses. I eventually trained with Jack Canfield and the Success Principle. I needed to find out who it was. There's nothing there that would help me go that extra way, but I couldn't go back to that old place. And I think that's where the biggest void is. We're training some good, you guys have some good programs here, and 22-0 does, and you guys, and Angel 14 is helping so many people, and Sarah's helped so many people. But where is it that you're helping the person that when they're at there, now what? Like, who am I now?
Yeah, totally agree. There has to be, we can't just say, go get help. Okay, we provided help. Now you're good. Well, yeah, but to your point, totally different person. How do I integrate back into my agency? How do I speak this new language that I've learned back in an environment that they may not have learned that same language that I now know? You're right. It has to be, that's where I actually really struggle with this idea that it's all about self-care. It's not just about self-care.
It's
Self-care
not.
is a huge piece of it, but the culture has to change so that people are welcomed back into a culture that's supportive. If the culture is still toxic, you can do all the self-care in the world, but it won't work if we don't hold responsible the organization.
Or
And that's back
learn
to
about
Chris's point
self-care.
of, yeah, and you
What is
can't be
it?
check boxes, right?
Like,
Yep.
I love hot baths with Epsom salts and that, but I didn't know how to meditate. I didn't know how, to enjoy a walk and just look at things, really look at things.
Be intentional in your life. Yeah.
Exactly. So I have one more question is about your peer support. And is it remote? Like, is it online or is it just in Colorado and stuff like that? I'd love to hear more about that. But
yeah. So we've always done it in Colorado. We typically do. So they're 35 to 40 hours. So they're usually like a week-long course. We usually do 3 or 4 a year in Colorado, but we've had so many requests from outside of Colorado. Our plan for 2022 is to create a virtual version where we can record some of the lecture material and then bring people together for a day or two to do the practice where they're telling the stories and practicing the peer support skills. Because a lot of people too struggle with, again, staffing issues across the country, right? That people are struggling to be able to release their people to do the week-long training. So we're going to pivot and try to figure out how to do virtual versions of it.
Great. I would love to talk to you some more on that as I'm
Sure.
retired, but I still know a lot of police officers. I still know a lot and just want to serve. So
yeah, I love that.
Thank you.
Yeah, we can definitely chat more about it.
Thank you.
That's awesome. Thank you, Janet. And yeah, I honestly would love to hear more about the peer support thing as well. I think that the more people you can train up in that aspect, you're not committing to a new college degree, but at the same time, you're being able to put yourself in a partial clinical setting to be able to help others. So that's special. Michelle, I by the way, I have hands popping up like popcorn over here, so we're gonna try to move through it. But Michelle, you're up.
So I just wanted to see if I could get your advice as far as my education. With the way that everything's going right now with the PTSD and the doctors and everything, it's looking like I'm not going to be able to go back into dispatch. So I don't know how I got through it this year, but I did finally graduate with a bachelor's in professional psychology with an emphasis on counseling.
Nice.
So yeah, I'm super excited about it. However, I don't really know if I should stop there. I don't know if I should go on, and if so, what I should do, because I know that I still want to help first responders. I just can't do it as a dispatcher anymore. So I didn't know if maybe you had some suggestions, if there's schooling I should consider going forward with, or.
Yeah, congratulations. It's a big accomplishment. So good for you for taking a time in your life that is heavy and you're trying to kind of learn what this means for you and to take that and create meaning and purpose and graduate. That's a huge deal. So kudos to you for that. That's amazing.
Thank you.
And now I would tell you there's kind of a couple different routes you can go. If you really wanted to serve as a clinician, counseling, doing individual counseling, that sort of thing, you probably would really want to look into pursuing a master's degree. The only way to eventually become a licensed clinician of any sort is to first get that master's, but it's a long road. It's a couple of years of classes, and then you got to get all your hours for licensure and take the big exam. The other option is if you wanted to work in like alcohol and substance treatment centers, you could look at a CAC, which is like a certificate. There's 3 different levels of CAC. It's a certified alcohol counselor is what that stands for. So certified alcohol counselor, that's what they call them in Colorado. I think that's the national standard, but there's level 1, level 2, level 3. And any of those would be certificates you could get, but they'd be really specific to working in substance use. But again, I think we're also seeing more substance use treatment centers popping up specifically for responders because that's a thing.
Yeah.
So that would be another option to kind of look at.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great, great questions, Michelle. And Todd, you're up.
Thank you, Sarah. So I just kind of made it into the light this last year. Thank God for EMDR.
Yes.
And so now I'm training in the chaplaincy and in peer support, and a good combination, I think, because a lot of agencies do have chaplaincy programs, and the group that I'm training with, the U.S. Chaplains Task Force, which grew out of the New York State Chaplains Task Force, they're forming a sub-team called the First Responder Assistance Teams, which are made up of chaplains that have actual first responder experience
Nice.
to do peer support. I was having a conversation with Dave Grossman, and he was talking about, how how unique the types of trauma that are experienced across the different areas in the first responder community. And like here in Iowa, most of the chaplaincy programs are at the city level. So you're a chaplain for both the police department and the fire department. And I'm wondering, I know that my experience as a firefighter can certainly help me out as in doing peer support for other firefighters, but I dispatched for a while too. But I wonder, can you train as a first responder who wasn't a law enforcement officer? Can you be an effective peer support for law enforcement?
I would
the other way
say,
around.
yeah, I would say yes, as long as you're willing to learn the culture, in the same way that I've never been a responder myself. But I'll tell you, I've got a really great reputation here in the metro area and throughout Colorado of responders who understand I get it, because I've been willing to learn. I've done the work to do ride-alongs, and I've gone to, countless critical incidents. They've seen me in the muck with them enough to know I didn't have to be a responder for them to trust me enough to come and talk to me about things. And I think the same applies to a peer support program, in that as long as you're willing to do the work to understand the uniqueness of the cultures within the responder culture. Fire is different than law enforcement. Law enforcement is different than dispatch. Dispatch is different than crime scene investigators. Crime scene investigators are different than investigators and detectives. So each of those responder cultures have a unique culture within it. And if you want to be a peer supporter for, more than just fire, you just have to be willing to learn those cultures. And I think that that's absolutely doable. I think to the piece you were talking about with Grossman about the unique traumas, yes, I think there are very unique traumas that impact military personnel versus responder personnel versus even the uniqueness within each of those cultures. I think we need to have more of a conversation culturally that it's not just the trauma itself. You guys are trained to manage the trauma. They don't teach you how to manage the shame and the judgment and the fear that comes with having gone through the trauma. That's the problem, not the trauma. Yes, you guys are exposed to a lot of trauma. You did know that, and you were trained on that. No one trained you on, holy shit, are they going to judge me? Or I said I'm struggling, and now they're saying they don't think I'm fit for duty. WTF, right? Like it's actually, in my experience, the shame, fear, judgment, self-criticism, that's what we have to tackle. Not so much necessarily the trauma piece, if that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you.
And that makes
Absolutely.
complete sense. And I think, Sarah, one of the things that we talk about often that I think is important to mention in this context is the idea of betrayal. And I think so many folks have, especially in this group, have experienced that level of betrayal. And that's a learned behavior and a learned response. And when you then add in what is such a vulnerable position of your own, not knowing how to deal with what your brain is telling you, that level of betrayal that you've experienced before becomes a block to going forward again. And
Absolutely.
I think that's something that that's a barrier that needs to come down in the first responder world. So I think we have a lot of work to do there as well. But I think a lot of the fix, and I know you're into it as well as the resiliency piece is huge. And the more we can teach that, the whole concept of bouncing forward, I think will bring a lot of openness to this conversation with other people.
I agree. And I think it's about teaching responders that they are naturally resilient because they're in this job. You guys are trained from day one. What happens when plan A doesn't work? You plan A harder, and then you go to plan B, and then you go to plan C, and then you go to plan D. Like, you guys don't ever stop on a call and like, well, that didn't work. What do we do now? Like, what the fuck? Why are you here if you get stuck and you can't figure out how to mentally flex? So mental flexibility and / resiliency is at the core of who you guys are as humans. The problem is they teach you to do it at work and they forget to teach you to take it home.
Agreed.
And so then you guys go home and you're incredibly not mentally flexible. And that doesn't serve you well at all.
I couldn't agree more. Very well put. Brenda, you're up.
So I just, as the nurse in the group who has gone through my own, whatever you want to call it, hell, living hell, betrayal, whatever. I think my biggest words are betrayal and stigma and trust. As a nurse, I'm trained to help people. When I went in my moment of need for help, I was specifically told by the provider, whatever you do, don't tell anyone, any of your colleagues, because no one is ever going to want to work with you. Okay. That put a whole other level of stigma that I was unaware of, and in hindsight, I realized, okay, she had her own baggage or stuff that she was dealing with. And at that moment, she dumped all of hers on me. And betrayal in that even within our own nursing, everything is supposed to be confidential. It's not, because providers are providing that care within those same facilities, and you walk in and everyone knows why you're there. So while I'm trying to deal with my own stuff confidentially, because that's what I was told to do, I walk in and the staff already knows what I'm there for. And then because gossip becomes gossip, everybody knows what you're going through and what you're there for, whether you personally disclosed it or not. And so what I have found, being that I work in the community and I work with first responders and veterans, is that when I'm talking with them about, we have these services, there's this, there's that, and all the things that are available, they do not want to go to the behavioral services within their own department. They want outside resources. And it's because of that reason. They don't want everyone to know. And again, that goes back to the stigma. If we all accepted, we all have our weak moments. There's all a time where none of us, it's okay to not be okay. The problem is nobody wants to talk about it. And I have a friend that took her life, which is how I, as a nurse, started, volunteering with suicide prevention. Then I had other people that I knew, and because it's the nurse in me, it's just I fell into it. And because I'm so good at talking, because it's a gift and that's what I do, church greeter goes a long way. It just kind of grew. And then because I'm a nurse and, it put me to the first responder world and in it all. But I'm also a part of that world. And I think, I shared a story I was presenting in front of a audience of law enforcement. And, you know, and I shared, you know, to them, because this is 100% true. I said, there was a time where one of you took me on a 5150. And at that moment, like any stigma I ever had kind of like went out the door, because I threw myself out there. You know, if I was gonna be as real as I could be to these officers who doubt everyone, you know, that was the truest moment that there was, you know, and you know, and I'm thinking, oh Lord, now everyone's gonna know me. That's the girl that we took on a 5150. But you know, there was the little nervous laughter, and then like, oh yeah, you know, one of our own took their lives too. This is, you know, this is real shit.
Heavy. Yeah.
And so later on, one of the officers came up to me and she said, you know, I want to thank you for saying that. And, you know, and then she started to tell me about her story. So I knew at that moment that, you know, not that that's the key to open people up, but if
It is the key. Yep.
Right. And if you're going to be as honest as you can helping other people, you need to be yourself as vulnerable as you can. I mean, I can think of 100 reasons why I would never want to go up there and tell officers that. They live in my neighborhood, they work in my community. Like, you know, I could be dating one of them, like, oh yeah, that's the girl. You know, so there's 1,000 reasons why, but the reasons as far as like helping others, that's what we need to do. And you know, we're so good at lying at ourselves that we're okay. As a nurse, I'm good at taking care of everyone else except for me. You know, I know self-care. I know how to do it 100%. My bathroom looks like a spa, you know, but when it came to that time for me reaching out, you know, what I was told, I mean, was, I can say it now, it was a detriment to what I needed at the moment, which is why I do what I do. Because I've been there. And when I was there and I needed the care, like Janet said, I didn't get what I needed, which put me on a whole other spiral. So, you know, that one thing that I said, and even later again, I was somewhere else at another event and someone else came up to me. I remember, you're the girl that said that. So I joke with someone that's very dear to me. I'm like, sweetheart, you know, I'm always going to be that girl because I said it. But you know what? I know from experience on being both sides of that line, I am not the only one, but we need to get to that level where we're honest with each other, because otherwise we're not helping each other.
I totally agree. And I think what you just shared is such a beautiful example of resiliency, which is acknowledging the betrayal that you experienced. And that was very real. What you chose to do is, I was betrayed, but I'm going to keep looking for my tribe because I know it's out there. I'm going to keep looking. If this tribe fails me, I will go look for another one. And I will go find my people who will accept me for who I am and will accept my story. And you found your people. And now you've given them an opportunity to feel safe because you shared. And I think that that is so incredibly powerful. I think it's incredibly needed. To your point, I have seen, you know, early in my career, I used to have people in my office, they'd say, okay, can you go check the hallways so I can make sure that I can leave your office without anybody seeing me? And I'd be like, okay, I'll go out there and check to make sure there's no one here. And I'm like, F that, no, get out of my office, see who you see. Because now I know we've created such a safe space. Nick and I both, we laugh. We have people who hang out in our waiting room and we have coffee and tea and they hang out and they just chat. They're like, hey, I haven't seen you in forever. And now it is this place where they feel safe. They know I'm here and you're here for the same reasons. We're working on our stuff. And they know that now that's something to be celebrated. You don't see rank getting in the way. You don't see, you know, oh my God, someone on my shift. No, they just all welcome each other. They'll hug each other, and it's a safe space to do that. But it takes a lot of people's efforts to create that sort of culture. Nick and I, again, when we ask people to tell their stories, we certainly don't say they have to tell their stories, but we don't tell ours. We tell our stories too. I appreciate that Brenda, you were willing to share your story. I will say, every time I do an in-service, I tell every new room, I've experienced suicidal ideation. Suicidal ideation is an absolutely normal response to being injured. It is a severe, significant injury, psychological injury that someone has been through. And suicide ideation is a symptom of a psychological injury. I've had 2 miscarriages in my life early on. Husband number 1, not husband number 2. Again, husband number 2 is the upgrade. Shit show. Husband number 1 was a lot of shit show. But I had 2 miscarriages during my first marriage, and they were brutal on me psychologically. And the first miscarriage was especially traumatic for me. And they gave me oxy. It was a missed miscarriage, so I had to have surgery. Really traumatic. And they gave me a bunch of oxy. And for about 6 months, I would lay in bed with the bottle of oxy and fantasize about taking them. And I'm a shrink. I know all the things. I know self-care. I know trauma. I know grief and loss. I know all the things. That doesn't mean I'm not human and that I'm not completely susceptible to suicide ideation and being hurt and being human. And so I tell all of my officers, my firefighters, my dispatchers, I tell people that story because I'm not ashamed of it. That was simply my story. And it's an experience of being in the dark, which we all know sucks. But coming out of the dark feels really great. It's really hard to get out. And that's something to celebrate, is I got out of the dark, and I want many more stories of people getting out of the dark so people can relate to that. I'm in the dark now, but there's all these stories of people who've said, oh yeah, I've been there. It sucked, but I got out, and this is what helped me get out. So people can relate to somebody's story of coming out of that. And so the fact that you share your story is beautiful and powerful and amazing.
Absolutely, because there was a time where I was still with that stigma, that I didn't want anyone to know, and I didn't this and I didn't that. And when the other side to the story is the mentor who was involved, who I worked with, 15 years, who I admired, it was such a betrayal that, I didn't want to be a nurse anymore. I hated everyone involved. And it wasn't until a few years ago that he actually went through his own stuff, but very publicly. And he jumped off a bridge and took his own life. And at that moment, like, whatever was left that I thought, like, I don't want anyone to know. I don't want anyone to know. It kind of flipped, like, you know what, like, now what, where do I take this? That was like, it was the final closure, but opening that, like, okay, I'm okay to be out there again. I'm okay to, say that I'm okay, but this happened and it's okay. If I made it through, and it was a hell of a way to get back through, but shit happens,
and celebrate your story, right? I mean, when you find your way out of the dark, that's something to celebrate, because we know that not everybody does, and it's heartbreaking when they don't. But man, the rest of us can light up the journey for them, and light up, hey, look over here, there's light around this corner, there's light around that corner. And all of us, I think, lighting the way for people who are still in the dark is vulnerable, but it's something we can do for the tribe.
I agree 100%. And one thing that we talk about often is the whole candle concept. When you're able to light somebody else's candle, you don't lose any light from your own. So passing that along and brightening the room is so important. We do have some more hands, but Sarah, I just wanted to talk time with you for a quick second. We're at 22:09, 10:09. Just wanted to make sure that you were good with the time.
I'll hang out with you guys for as long as you want to hang out with me.
Awesome. Very cool. Thank you.
But good night, Chris. I don't know if he's still here, but he was signing off in the chat. So thanks for joining us. It's really cool to meet you.
Chris has date night every Thursday.
Way to go,
we
Chris.
lose Chris at 2200. So
good for him.
Love you guys. Thank you so much for being here, Dr. Metz. Love you all.
Take care. Love you too.
Paul Curtis, you're up, buddy.
I have several comments. The first to Sara Metz. I know that people will look at you and say, well, through all this kind of stuff, how could you help me? But guess what? That is exactly how you could help me. And I just think that much more of you for having made yourself vulnerable, and at the same time did it in a very positive manner. You didn't weren't being judgmental. You were just throwing it out there and saying, here I am. And so I think that's great. To Brenda, who mentioned 5150. That is the California code, health and welfare. And it's for people who get a 72-hour hold so they won't harm themselves. And I actually pulled over a car one day with a license plate that said 50 on it. And I didn't know whether it was a joke, a screwball, or what it was. It was a cop in his own car.
Oops.
And Dave, earlier today, you mentioned choir practice. And there is a real value in that. Now, I don't happen to drink, but being able to sit out in the parking lot after shift, late at night, and just listen to people and hear what they have to say, and then make suggestions is valuable. And I didn't go out there as a sergeant. I went out there as a police officer. End of story. I mean, it wasn't about rank. It was just, you know, these guys are there because they're backing me up. And my role as a servant leader was to raise them up. And so that's just literally how I approached it. And that was back in the early 80s. I think that asking for help, regardless of your rank, regardless of your role, regardless of your position, takes more courage than not asking for help. And the consequences are polarized as a result of asking for help or help. And while I will admit that if you get the wrong help, that's not going to do you much, but at least in Janet's case, she could recognize it early enough and realize that that was not for her and move on to somebody else. By the way, Janet, my family's from Prince Edward Island, so you're not the only Canuck here tonight. And Nick, is Nick here? Yeah, there he is. My brother lived in Fife, Washington. You know anything about them?
You're on mute, hun.
There we are. Do I know anything about who?
The people in Fife, Washington. My brother was the mayor a number of years, and I just thought maybe you guys had run into each other somewhere.
No, I've only been to Fife like a couple times. It's quite a distance from Seattle.
Yeah.
Hey, I graduated from Cowpie High, Fife High School.
Anyway, I think that covers most of what I wanted to say, except for I think it's a tremendous help if you can be a good listener. And sometimes people just need to talk and vent and get it off their chest. And you just listen. You don't have to scream at them or tell them to shut up or any of that. You just listen and let them talk. And by the time they have expended the energy to do the talking that they want to do, they calm themselves down. And then you just share some thoughts with them based on what they've said, or refer them to resources that you know are available to them. And to be a psychologist, I just was a good listener and said, don't jump.
I think that's a really important point, Paul, that listening and active listening is huge. And I think also helping people recognize that you don't always have to fix something. I think you guys are all naturally fixers and you're trained on how to fix things and look for the threat, look for the thing that's wrong and look for the solution, which is fantastic, again, in so many of the environments you're in. But when you're talking about peer support and just offering a friend, you know, and a kind of support, to your point, is so many times people just need to feel heard and accepted wherever they're at. You don't have to fix it. You guys are actually really good at fixing your own problems. You'll get there. You might take the long way around. You might slam into the ground a couple of times before you get it right, but you'll fix it. You'll figure it out. What you need is for someone to just say, I'll cheer you on. This sucks. Let's just sit here in the suck for a minute together. And I'm not going to leave you behind. We'll get up when you're ready. And I think that that's huge. So listening, and listening, not to fix, but just to see people, I think is a big deal.
Well, one of the things that I really tried hard to do, and I don't know that I always succeeded, but I tried very hard not to be judgmental. Not to take sides, not to say, oh, you're right or you're wrong or the other guy is wrong. None of that. I just listen. And sometimes they were looking for a cohort, if you will.
Yeah.
And that was me.
See, you're nicer than I am.
That's a no-win situation.
It is, but I always laugh. And I tell people all the time, I am not a nice therapist. I am not the nice kind. I judge people all the time, but I still love you. I'm going to judge you. If you're doing stupid shit, I'm going to tell you that's stupid. I'm going to judge the shit out of you. Don't do stupid shit, people, but I'm going to love you through it. I never, and my clients know I love them no matter what, even when I'm frustrated, when I think they're making bad decisions, when I tell them they're making bad decisions, but I still love you. And so I think that you can judge.
I can tell somebody they're making a bad choice.
Yeah.
And not feel any remorse for that whatsoever.
Yep.
But I'm not licensed like you are, at least not in that way. And so
I paid a lot of money to be able to judge people. Just kidding.
Well, and look at our courts. In any event, thank you for allowing.
Thank you for all that, Paul. Appreciate it. Your comments, your questions. And Sarah, just to touch on one thing that you had said, when we're teaching our resiliency class, one of the things we always say is with the active listening piece is we've all been through so many parallels, but nobody's experiences are the same, right?
Correct.
So everybody processes them differently. So everybody's experience is different, but we've all had similar related experiences. And if after someone's done vomiting themselves to you, just to respond, me too, I get it. Just that without the hashtag, because we don't make it a political statement.
That turns it another direction. Yes.
But yeah, just that simple phrase of me too. I think it really resonates with folks, and it's just such a simple response. So yeah, that compassionate listening, that active listening, I think is so important. And our group queen, Sara Carell, hands up.
Like that group queen. Thank you, David. Well, Sarah, I was just texting Nick actually back. It's really great to have this conversation. I feel like it's right on time for what we talk about a lot from all the stories that we hear. And it's really exciting to me to see the work that you're doing. And you have a great personality. I can imagine how good you are at your job.
Tell Nick that. Is Nick still here? I do have a good personality, damn it.
No, just get it writing, Sarah.
I'm feisty. I get annoying after about an hour and a half, just so you guys know. This is the fun part of me. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. I mean, I'm sure, you're such a great navigator, I'm sure, because you're very straightforward. You're very potent, and your comments. But it's really exciting to see the work that you guys are doing. Just to hear, just because you are so culturally competent and you really get it. It's so clear. And you have the education for psychology, and you and Nick are just obviously such a great team in being able to build these, different resources for our first responders. And I am thrilled that you guys came on, that Nick before and now you. It's really nice to meet you.
Well, we love what we do, and we really are grateful. Thank you for the platform. It's always fun to meet new responders and get to know folks, and we're very grateful for the opportunities that get tossed our way. So thanks for having us.
Well, I am thrilled about that you'll be able to meet all these other people, because I really do feel like these people, we all met through LinkedIn. That's where I connected with people, and then having people come together. These are the people that are really moving forward and really want to help. I always think of them as the cream of the crop, first responders and veterans. And so for you all to just be able to meet, for you to meet them and them to connect with you, you never know what can come out of this. So again, that's all I have to say, but thank you again.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Before I just throw it to anybody else who's interested, Sarah, I look forward to talking with you and Nick offline outside of this forum. As I'm sitting here with double screens going on and looking at some of the people that we're joined up with, like Lou Schlosser and Bill Mazer from, that's my Jersey crew.
Yay.
And,
I love Lou.
He's the best.
I
He
miss
really is.
him.
He's
I always
such
see
a
him at
best.
ISCP every year, and I haven't been to ISCP. It's been virtual the last couple of years, but he's good people. Yeah.
Oh my God, the best. And he's really tied into the resiliency program that I've been working with. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, Resilient Minds on the Front Lines.
Yes, yes.
Okay. So
Okay.
Mike Pellegrino is one of my closest friends, and
Ah,
that's the program I always reference.
that's a good crew you run with.
They're awesome. They really are. And they've done, honestly, that they all came from the state level and producing the resiliency program officer operation here in New Jersey. So I look forward to connecting with you guys offline and seeing how we can all join hands and make this a bigger effort.
Happy to. Again, I think you clearly, all of you are really passionate about serving the responder community, and that genuinely is my calling and Nick's calling. And so we're always happy to link arms with other people who have that same passion and see what we can bulldoze through in terms of getting rid of the stigma and making progress. And I think, I've been very fortunate to see shift in the past 12 years that I've been doing this, really genuine shift. And I look forward to seeing what else is to come.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Anybody else have anything they want to say or ask before we say our closing hymn here?
Thank you guys. Thanks for sharing your stories with me and each other.
Awesome.
Sarah,
Oops, sorry.
I think this arises out of fear, and whether it's fear from rejection or termination or whatever the other elements of fear are in this setting. Having servant leadership at the top will quickly resolve that, because those people want to see their people succeed. I did, and I'm sure Dave did. And why would you not want them to succeed? I had no fear of somebody taking my job. So I think recognizing that the stigma of asking for help and doing that sort of thing carries with it some fear. And I think that's where the barrier is. And I think that might be a good target for healing that, if you will.
Yeah, totally agree. I think fear absolutely is one of the things we have to continue to fight through. I think where I start with that is you guys do scary things all the time. So we know that you can do scary things even in the face of fear. And I think the more we keep pushing past it and having examples of people who said, I'm going to push through that fear and see what's on the other side. Again, I most certainly know that people have pushed through and have been betrayed and have been horribly treated for pushing past that fear. I absolutely do not minimize that at all. But I think the way forward is to continue to push and push and push and have more and more success stories. So agencies who are behind the 8 ball on it start to feel embarrassed that they are not taking care of their people in the way that everyone else around them is. So I think the more examples we have of you're still treating people like crap, look at how everybody else handles this. I think leaders will realize, oh, I guess this is the new way of servanthood. So I think we got to push through it.
you probably understand that when reason fails, use force.
Yeah, I'm all for that.
Hard.
That's my favorite. Just push the way through it.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. If nobody else wants to or has anything else to say or ask, I think we can wrap it up. We've been at almost an hour and a half, an hour and 26 minutes. So Sarah, can't thank you enough for your time, and obviously extend our best to Nick as well. And thank you for his time. Amazing group, and I hope you continue to come back and join us when you have the opportunity, and just be part of the family. So thank you. And again, look forward to speaking with you guys separately on all these issues. So Sara Carell, back to you. And thank you for providing this platform for this experience for everybody.